Hi everyone, my name is Albert Świdziński. Welcome to Strategy and Future, and welcome to the fifth installment of our videos concerning the Zapad 21 exercise. With me is Nick Myers, who will tell us all about it. Thank you, Nick, for being with us today.
Hi, Albert. Thanks for dealing with me again in the middle of the night.
A pure pleasure. It really is. All right, Nick, so take it away. I'll leave it all to you.
Yep. So as you said, we're on to day 5 of this already. So we're starting to come near the end. So we're looking at the events from the evening of September 13th, Monday, to about 7:30 p.m., 1930 Moscow time of the 14th of September on the Tuesday. So coming towards the end, today was a bit lighter, not nearly as many events to cover as there had been yesterday or even over the weekend, which is a bit unusual, honestly. So as I was talking with Jacek last night, obviously we had our first major state leader visits over the past 2 days. Lukashenko visiting Obrazlovsky on Sunday, and Putin coming up to Molino on yesterday, on Monday. Bring up the map so everybody sees what we're referring to again, just in case people are starting to forget. So yeah, that's Lukashenko out here, Putin out here in the east. And it was a big technology fair, was how I would describe the larger event going on in Molino, is the attempt to demonstrate the usefulness of a variety of Russian military equipment that had been being discussed for a long time in the Russian press, but had not been demonstrated in any open source exercise to this time, including things like the Inahadets strike UAV, things like that. So that was kind of interesting to see that this was the debut of these particular technologies. In particular, strike UAVs, though they've been long discussed in the Russian press, have not really been a feature of Russian operational usage. UAVs in Russia are very much a reconnaissance function. Sometimes they'll carry munitions on them, but when they do that, it's more of a kamikaze function than actually trying to use it in some way similar to how the Reaper, for example, would have been used in the war in Afghanistan or in Iraq. So after that, we didn't really have too many events over the past 24 hours. A couple of things that should be pointed out. There was a simulated terrorist / saboteur group taking over the port in Baltijsk in Kaliningrad that was relieved by a combination of Northern Fleet Marines and the Baltic Fleet counter DRG combat group based in Baltijsk. So that is decently interesting inside of an urban port environment. We also had the use of Su-34 nuclear-capable fighter bombers doing airstrikes on Luga this one's Luga next to Krasny, near St. Petersburg. These are moving from operational airfields that seem to be still concentrated overwhelmingly in the south of Russia. We also saw the air defense system go under a unified command supposedly between Russia and Belarus. Not much evidence that the Belarusians are really participating in this per se. What's kind of unusual about this one is that usually the Unified Air Defense Command is one of the first things that comes up in the exercise, and I believe Zapad 21 actually had a Unified Air Defense Command right at the start. They just reinvigorated it, I suppose, or restarted it under a new joint command, perhaps. Either way, they were intercepting up to 60 targets. They were aided by non-AEW Russian aircraft, 50 Russian aircraft flying around, searching for other air targets and feeding the targets into the larger air defense network. And then the major op for playing this was Russian strategic bombers, in particular the Tu-95 strategic bomber that appears to have flown from the main operating base in Saratov Oblast, which is way out Saratov Oblast, way out in Central Military District. Those long-range aviation, not subject to the military districts, flying up into the Western Military District area for a simulated interception. Beyond that, we did see a couple of interesting scenarios around Brest again, where the Russians were using the UAVs to detect where the bases of the enemy that is infiltrated into the Union state head was, and then managed to set up an ambush using some rapid reaction tactics in order to force the enemy to surrender without fighting, which is a tactic that I've seen come up a bit more frequently in the past year, but really did not figure into many Russian exercises in the past. It was always sort of assumed that it'd be nice if they did, but we need to be ready to fight them anyhow. So interesting that that was scripted in here. But beyond that, not too much else of interest. There's obviously the Arctic Expeditionary Group functioning in the north, but all we heard even from them was a couple more instances of air-ground combat around the Murmansk area, as well as the launch of the Bastion coastal missile system was launching from Alexander Land and Franz Josef Land way out here up in the Arctic. So that was kind of interesting that they were using that base. But otherwise, sort of an unusually quiet day in Zapad, especially since we're not quite at the end and we already did a demonstration for the state leaders. So perhaps regathering for some more dramatic events as we enter into the final 2 days.
So if anything, because this seems to be, I don't know to exactly what extent, but this seems to be a running theme that this was, insofar as, fears and expectations coming from the West, the Zapad was a dud. There wasn't much going on, right? Do you think that this figures or fits into some sort of signaling by Russia? How would it be? How do those maneuvers compare, or those exercises compare to 2017 version in terms of intensity of them? Is this surprising to you? This relative calm?
Well, I wouldn't say that this is entirely a dud. Today was kind of a dud, but I also think that the structure of this one seems unusually politicized. And as much as my suspicion now is we're going to see Putin and Lukashenko get together for one big party towards the end, we'll get this major event. I remember from Kavkaz 2020, we didn't do a day-by-day for that one for a variety of reasons, but it would have been pretty boring because most of Kavkaz 2020 was pretty quiet until the last day when suddenly there was a tirade of very interesting things that happened all at once. The whole debut of a bunch of concepts. I know, indeed, most of the news generated that day came from Gerasimov doing an interview that went over all the concepts that had been practiced. If I remember correctly, even more so than just Russian MOD press briefings. And that appears to be still what's going on here. What remains the unusual aspect of Zapad at large is that it started highly intense, which is not typical for the past couple of strategic operational exercises in the West. If we compare it to the expectations in 2017, when there was honestly some pretty ridiculous speculation about how this was going to be the cover-up for the invasion of Belarus. And I say ridiculous because nobody who was predicting that was taking any serious look at just the quantity of logistics required to do this. I think Belarus is quite substantially larger than Crimea. And it's something we should also bear in mind when we're talking about a Russian takeover of the Baltic states. Though we don't talk about the Baltic states being particularly large, they are bigger than Crimea and are harder to defend than Crimea is as well. So they would require a considerable amount of movement of forces in order to accomplish. However, I would say that this has not played out according to the expectations I would have had before this exercise started. And I think I discussed with you when we were talking 2 days ago, I was coming into this expecting us to have a southwestern strategic direction exercise this time around because the Russians had not done one. And they've appeared to be not doing northwest strategic direction from earlier, but they're not. At least according to the Belarusians, the principal focus here is on the western operational direction from them, which is equivalent to the western strategic direction in the Western Operational Command in Belarus, Western Strategic Direction in Russia, which is pretty much straight at Poland. But even so, the quantity of forces that has been moved forward into Belarus is not in a sufficient quantity that I would feel especially threatened at this time and place in Poland right now. It is interesting to see the movements of forces so far forward again. Because obviously this is similar to Zapad 2013 when they were quite close to the Polish border indeed, as opposed to Zapad 2009 when they were a bit further back, still practicing the Western Operational Command, but pretty much in the middle of Belarus, not terribly far away from where Zapad 2017 ended up being played sometime later, even though it was looking at a different strategic direction. So we're left with this interesting question that is there actually a specific strategic direction that's being exercised in this in Zapad 2021? Because obviously the Belarusian Northwestern Operational Command has been sending forces to Molino inside of Russia, which is kind of unusual again. And it also making it even more unusual is that the 120th Guards Mechanized Brigade of Belarus, which is involved in practically every high-profile exercise Belarus does, has not yet surfaced in this exercise. So it's quite possible they're not really participating, or they're going to show up in a big way at the very end. It would not be the first time that some units that have been quiet the whole exercise are abruptly revealed to be in a quite interesting place, but only on the last day or two of the exercise. So the fact that the units are being moved about suggests to me that the most interesting aspect of Zapad 2021 is that they're planning, is the degree to which they're planning for nonlinear warfare and doing just extremely long distance C2 channels in order to respond to widely disparate threats going on across a pretty broad area. And I do suspect that when we get to the last phase, which the only part they have previewed is that it's going to be marked by a lot of aerial descent operations, that we are going to see some fairly curious hints as to the limits of what Russian strategic descent power projection is these days. Sorry, a bit a long-winded answer there, but that's what I'm thinking the interesting thing is going to be.
That is fantastic. But Nick, since it was a slow day, maybe there was something else happening across Russia that we should pay attention to. If I could comment, I don't know if you heard about this. I'm sure you did. There was some GPS spoofing in Zatoka Gdańska in Poland. That was a thing that hit the Polish media today in a major way. I don't know if you heard about this, but other than that, maybe there's something worth mentioning outside of Zapad that we should speak about.
So I did hear about those rumors. Obviously, I'm looking at them mostly through Polish sources. So without Russian contextualization, I tend not to touch it in too much detail, even though it's important to note. Whether or not it has something to do with Zapad, probably does, but it's difficult to state what role it's specifically supposed to be playing here, other than testing how is Poland literally going to respond, which tends to be much more of an intelligence question rather than a military operations training question. But still interesting to note. But there are a couple of other exercises going on outside of Zapad and even Arctic Expeditionary Group that are of interest that are probably worth mentioning. Obviously, Russia is a big country with lots of different places. You can have exercises all over the place, and they don't necessarily have to do anything with Zapad. So in the Southern Military District, they are currently at the final culminating point of their now regularly running month-long battalion tactical exercise culmination, as I would say. They start with a bunch of company tactical exercises and they start to merge them into bigger and bigger things. This one's been a kind of unusual in that it's not been a progressive shift. They're sort of going off and on different polygons, but they've got 4 different large ones going on right now, including one in South Ossetia, believe one is in Volgograd. Rostov one ended last week, so they were the big one from last week, and they moved up to regimental scale. One in North Ossetia, and then I don't know, but I forget what the fourth one is. I think it might be in Stavropol. That's one, the ones that finished. But that's occupying the energy currently of General Dvornikov, the Southern Military District Commander, who, if I had to bet money on it, is probably going to be the guy to succeed Gerasimov ultimately. Interestingly, he is today in North Ossetia preparing an exercise that's not supposed to start until next week, supposedly, which is going to be a new BARS or reservist training exercise. So the big story, I suppose, that the Russians want to put down for 2021 at large is more reservist exercises. We have that. We had a couple of our smaller exercises inside of Crimea, mostly live fire things, not especially complicated in terms of scenario, at least not in the open source anyhow. Way out in the east, we do have a couple of interesting things going on. The 12th Chief Directorate, which is the sub-strategic nuclear weapons storage guys of the Russian Federation, were inspecting some facilities in the Far East today. They've been a bit more visible this year than they have of late. I think they might just have better public affairs officers these days, or something of that nature, as opposed to actually trying to signal within Zapad. But we might see a big shift in the next day or two if suddenly 12 Lumos becomes a bigger and bigger part of the story at the end of Zapad. That'd be much big, be similar to what I was originally thinking of, moving towards sub-strategic nuclear weapons type talk, but it appears that we're not going in that direction with Zapad. We also did see the Central Military District has some fighters moved out to Buryatia, east of Lake Baikal, to Telemba polygon, which is a pretty major live missile fire polygon. They shot off a couple of air-to-air missiles today. So that's unusual. I mean, it's not an everyday occurrence, but still movement away from Zapad. And then other than that, there's also one other battalion tactical exercise going on in Transnistria, which is not especially common. The Transnistrian operational group of forces in Transnistria loves to send out press releases about random stuff that they're doing, but they're very rarely at the Uchenia level. So this one's a bit unusual that they did get up to Uchenia. Usually they talk about Zanyati, and those are much lower priority in terms of Russian training. But again, nothing especially dramatic today. It's just been a quiet day after, as everybody rests up from their Alexander Nevsky celebrations. His 800th anniversary was, I think, yesterday officially, or Sunday. So we've got a couple of Orthodox priests flying around with relics that are creating some fun church pictures if you're reading Russian Ministry of Defense press releases. But yeah, just sort of a quiet day.
And nothing like Orthodox priests christening the AK-74s, which I'm sure is the picture you are aware of. But
oh yes,
sure enough.
I remember when the patriarch actually put out a message saying that we need to stop blessing nuclear weapons. This is not okay, guys. And for about a year after that, the Russian MOD drastically curtailed the frequency with which it showed the priests out doing stuff. Yeah. It was a shame for people who enjoy pictures of monks wearing their medals, but still, from a liturgical perspective, the patriarch was correct.
It was sort of undesirable. Anyway, Nick, I guess this wraps it up for today. We will meet again tomorrow. Either me or Jacek will be here tomorrow with you, and we'll carry on with the next day of Zapad exercise, slowly coming to an end as well, as you said.
Yeah. So we leave everybody with a nice short video for today. And I get to go to bed a bit earlier.
Absolutely. Okay, great, Nick. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yep. Good night.
Good night.